Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's really disappointing that the Education Minister for this portfolio, so important this portfolio, has not turned up for this consideration in detail and has instead sent his junior minister to speak on his behalf. Very disappointing for Australians and certainly on this side of the chamber. I was reading through my consideration in detail speech from last year, and my opening line then was, "It's been 12 months since the Albanese government came to power, and unlike the Prime Minister's repeated promises, I haven't met an Australian who is better off under Labor." And that still seems to be the case, because 2 years later, 3 budgets later, and I can say that that statement still stands. In fact, I've yet to meet any Australian who's better off now than they were 2 years ago when this government came to power, or an Australian who felt safer or more secure than they did 2 years ago, because the reality is that Australians always suffer under Labor, and they can see through the thinly veiled lies and carefully crafted messages from Labor's best and expensive spin doctors. Australians know their housing and rental costs are higher now than they were 2 years ago, and they can see their gas electricity bills have skyrocketed since 21-22. In fact, a typical Australian household with a mortgage is $35,000 a year worse off under this Labor government than they were under the Coalition. And like many Australians, I was pretty disappointed with this year's budget. And as I flicked through the pages of the budget paper too, I thought, wow, we're a little light on for early childhood education. You might say surely there was a measure to help bring down the increasing cost of early childhood education, which has already risen back up, I say to the Minister, again by 7.1% in less than 12 months. But sadly, no, there was nothing, no relief for families from Labor, those families who are struggling to make ends meet and pay for the cost of their early childhood education. And if there's no support for families to cover their rising out-of-pocket costs, maybe there's some funding for families who have no access at all to early childhood education. And I'm talking about families who live in regional, rural and remote areas across our country, families who don't work a standard 9 to 5, and families who are stuck languishing on those very, very long waiting lists or can only get a day or two when they really need more than that. Well, if you're one of those families who was holding out for some help, you'll also be very disappointed, because there's nothing to increase access to early childhood education in this budget. Now, the government and the minister like to talk about no Australian being worse off under them and no child being left behind. But what they conveniently forget to tell you is that those statements don't apply to anyone who lives in a regional, in a rural or remote area. And we know that in many cases, children living in regional areas are more likely to start developmentally behind, when compared to children living in our capital cities. And yet this government has no plans to support children and their families in regional areas, just no plans. But you know what they do have plans for? 36,000 new public servants in Canberra. That's right, the government loves to talk about how important access to early learning is for children and their parents, but when it comes down to it, they would rather spend money on more Commonwealth employees than the future of this country. So I ask, with fees already skyrocketing, Minister, how do you plan to deliver cost of living relief to families accessing early childhood education? And Minister, what plans do you have to increase access for the many families across Australia who are stuck on waiting lists and struggling to pay their bills because many of them have no access? The Prime Minister said that this budget was for all Australians. What a great line, probably crafted by his media unit, because that's all it was, a line. Because this is not a budget for all Australians, and it most certainly isn't a budget for families with young children who need access to early learning. It's a budget full of despair and broken promises, a budget from a Labor government that lied to get into power, that divided us and then broke the spirit of so many through reckless policies and spending. And you've killed the great Australian dream of home ownership, you've crushed small businesses, and you're draining our regions dry. And Australians deserve better than another 3 years of hard Labor.